Welcome. My name is Kara-Leah from the Yoga Lunchbox, and today I'm here with Hamish Kenworthy from Apollo Power Yoga in Christchurch. Apollo Power Yoga opened in July 2013, which is a good 5 years ago now. And Hamish, you and I spoke about 4 years ago, didn't we? Maybe three.
Yes, it was late 2015.
Yeah. So I imagine a lot's changed in the studio since then, because back then you had just started to launch your teacher trainings, right?
Yeah, we started the studio from kind of ground zero in Central City, Christchurch, 2013. That was a demolition zone then. We had a building across from us and a building next to us that were both demolished in the first 6 to 12 months of our existence, which wasn't an ideal environment in which to start up a yoga studio. And we were a brand new business, and so it was hard encouraging people to come from the suburban circumstances that they had all fled to following the earthquakes in Christchurch in 2011, and to entice them back into the central city. But yeah, we got underway, and the idea of running a yoga teacher training wasn't really on my mind when I started the studio with Margot, my wife. And some things moved slower than we wanted, like the repopulation of Christchurch and the building of numbers of the studio. And some things moved a lot faster than we had anticipated, and the movement to run what we call a yoga intensive / teacher training, that emerged much earlier than I had envisaged that it might.
So I'm curious, because I think for people that weren't in Christchurch or haven't spent a lot of time in Christchurch, of course, the last 8 years have been defined by those earthquakes. And you were talking about starting the studio in 2013, so it's only a couple of years after the big ones. Can you give us an idea of what that was like for you, as a business? Like you said, you had like literally demolished buildings on either side of you and people weren't coming into the city. Was it still like the red zone, or what was it like?
Yeah, for quite a period of time after the earthquakes, there was a central city cordon while a lot of demolition work was taking place, while there were still unsanitary conditions. Restaurants were vacated on the 22nd of February 2011 and weren't returned to for years. And so there were some unhealthy conditions in many buildings, and there was rat infestations and things like that. And so a cordon remained in place for some period of time, monitored by the police to keep people safe and to avoid looting of damaged buildings and so on. So it was a pretty drastic environment. A total of about 80 to 90% of the buildings in the central city of Christchurch were either fell down or were knocked down as a result of the earthquakes. And so there was just a vast hollowing out. You could walk through the central city and think, well, where am I? Because there were no landmarks. There was nothing to get a reference from. But it was into that environment that we thought, well, we used to work in the central city, Margot and I, when we were practicing as lawyers in our different partnerships. And we feel a need for a yoga studio, and it can be in the central city. And so we just leapt in, and there was very little going on. There was the container mall called the Restart Mall. There was a bit in New Regent Street. There was one hotel and us. And so that was kind of some of the grassroots, the germs of regeneration of Christchurch.
It must have taken some courage to do that, because I know for studios, they rely a lot on like office workers and people in the area who are going to come before work or after work or on a lunch break, and you're kind of going in not knowing whether or not you've got those people there.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a program that Baron Baptiste runs that he's described in his book, 40 Days to Personal Revolution. And I did that program in early 2013. And there are some personal inquiry and questions involved as part of that program. And one week, one of the questions was, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? And then it asked to reflect on what are the things that stop you from doing that. And I wrote down, I'd open a yoga studio. And the things that stop me are the fear of failure, financial ruin, just a disaster, no one would come. And with the perspective of just looking at that in my journal on the sheet of paper after I'd written it down, I thought, I can put those fears and doubts aside. I can let my intuition light my way. And we opened a yoga studio.
Yeah, you did it. And so now, 5 years on, what's the inner city like? What's the city like you around? Has it completely regenerated and is it pumping?
Not completely, but very substantially. There's been a lot of rebuilding. There's been a lot of repopulation of the office buildings. There's a lot of hospitality. There's a lot more retail. And the central city is looking quite good. We've actually outgrown our first lease. We were finding that access to our premises right in the center of the city wasn't ideal as the city became busier. And so when we got to the end of our first 4-year lease, we relocated to kind of the periphery of the central city, not dead center where we had been right at the outset, but just a few minutes out from the center of the center city. So we've got new premises, larger premises, brighter, lighter premises, premises that we're prouder to have people come to, and premises from which we don't need to turn people away. We had reached a point where in our busiest classes, we weren't able to accommodate everybody at our old premises. Now we take all comers.
That is awesome. I love it. Like, you literally outgrew where you were. That's so, like, to do that as a yoga studio within 4 years, that is epic. One thing I want to ask you about that too, from a psychological perspective, I know that the ongoing earthquakes, and I mean, it was tremoring for years, right? Yeah. And just wondering, like, what role did you see your studio playing in supporting people's emotional and mental well-being through that time period?
Well, absolutely a role. We believe that yoga plays a role in supporting people physically, mentally, and spiritually at any time. But in a time of crisis and uncertainty where you can't even trust the ground beneath your feet, we had a role to play there. And so we offer a balance of classes. The majority of our classes are dynamic flowing vinyasa classes, but balanced and complemented with what we call Power Restore, which are more yin-oriented style classes. But we just kept on showing up, and not just giving the mechanics of the class, but always speaking to how you can deal with adversity. Always speaking to how you can be grounded within yourself even when there's maelstrom all around you. That there's always the access to being the eye of the storm, the eye of the hurricane. High winds all around you, but you're calm and clear in your purpose.
I love that. Because I'm familiar with Baron Baptiste's work, because he was one of the first yoga teachers. I didn't work with him in person, but I had that book, 40 Days to, I think it was the first yoga book I ever got, was that one, 40 Days to Personal Revolution. And he's very much about that, isn't he? Like, he's one of your main teachers, one of your main influences?
The main.
Yeah.
The main. He's had a really profound influence upon me. The way he speaks and the message that he delivers has really resonated with me. It's worked for me, and I feel like I'm a different person now from where I was the day before I met Baron, and that change came within moments of first seeing Baron. I showed up for a yoga teacher training, not having done any power vinyasa yoga. I didn't know what down dog looked like, didn't know what chaturanga looked like. I found out in a hurry. But at the first training, I was kind of hiding on the periphery, lurking off at the edges, had a predetermined expectation of what I was going to do, the extent of my participation in the program. And just through his process and the confidence that he ensued, I opened up, and I don't regret a single moment of opening up.
And so now, like, that you've been running the studio for 5 years, is it still very much influenced by that form of yoga, or are you responding to your clientele? Like, how do you figure out what to run and how to run things in terms of classes and styles, and do you keep up with trends? And
no, we remain really faithful to the journey into power practice that Baron Baptiste teaches. Like I say, we've got restore classes. We do one class a week of Budokan yoga, the Cameron Chain vehicle. But yeah, we stay with Journey into Power. I believe it stood the test of time. It's been around a few decades now. And I never get tired of it. I remain enthusiastic about it. Margot, my wife, remains enthusiastic about it. And our students remain enthusiastic with it. So we're not looking to be faddish. We're looking to just provide, a really solid, sound practice that will give you strength, that will give you mobility, and that will give you a spiritual clarity about yourself. But yeah, we're very much in the Baptiste tradition of practices.
Mm. I love that clarity of like knowing that when you go into Apollo Power Yoga, you know what you're getting, in terms of who you are, what you've trained, and how you're bringing that forth. And I guess that's extending now into the people you are training and teaching, because you run 6 intensives a year right now. Is that right?
No, we run 2 intensives. We've done a total of 6. And so that's complete trainings. 2 intensives, you've got to do the different 2. You can't repeat the same one. There's a slightly different curriculum across the 2. They're consistent but different. Do 2 intensives, and that's 1 training.
I see.
We've done 2 intensive 2016, 2017, 2018, and our next one is starting on the 12th of January 2019.
So if someone wants to do the yoga teaching training program, it includes 2 intensives, right?
And some contact time.
And some non-contact time. But I'm guessing from the way that you're phrasing it, that you don't actually need to necessarily be planning to teach yoga, that if you want to deepen your practice or do some personal development, that doing an intensive is also useful.
Absolutely. It's a Yoga Alliance approved RYS 200. So it meets the curriculum requirements for Yoga Alliance, and you can access information about our training through the Yoga Alliance website, as well as through our own website, apollopoweryoga.co.nz. And all of our teachers, bar one, who helps me, alternates weeks with me teaching the Budokan training, but all of our teachers, aside from that one who does the Budokan, have been through our teacher training program. And we've got 9 teachers teaching for us right now. So we've given an avenue for people to move into. We've taught people from other parts of the country. We've taught people who are located overseas. And so our reach is expanding all the time. But even if you don't want to teach yoga, it's a great step of personal development. We do a lot of personal inquiry. We do a lot of reflection. We take people out of their comfort zone and give them an opportunity to challenge themselves. A world without challenge is the world without the opportunity for growth and greatness. So we put people in a difficult situation, really something that they're uncomfortable with, and watch them blossom and support them in doing so.
I love that. And I'm wondering, what do you love most about working with people in that way? Because I get a sense that it might be your passion running these intensives and these trainings.
Yeah, it's funny that you should say that. I like doing private sessions with individuals and seeing, that they might come with an injury or some particular limitation, and I'm just looking to help that individual and give them access to their body and their movement, or recovery. I like teaching group classes. I like teaching small group classes, which have a different dynamic from big group classes. I like teaching groups of classes where there's only women, which have a different energy and feel about them to ones which have men in them. But I like teaching retreats. But I feel like I'm at my most powerful as a teacher, and I gain my most satisfaction from the teacher training programs that we run. They're long days, but it's like the longer the days, the greater the work, the more vital I become. And they've been a great learning experience for me as to, how much I can carry on my shoulders. Before I did the first one, the longest program I'd run was like an 8-hour day. That was the longest program that I'd done. We do 7.5 days of about 11 to 12 hours a day on these trainings. And so it's a big step up for me. And I can recall on the very first intensive we did, I got to about day 6, and I thought, I'm running short of material. We didn't have many people on our first training, and we consumed material quickly. And I got to about day 6, and I thought, what am I going to do? I need something more. And who do you think you are, Hamish, to think that you can run a training and you're not properly prepared, and what's going on? And then a little voice cleared its throat inside me and said, Hamish, in fact, this is day 6, and you are doing this, and you can do this. I just went back to my room, and I read a chapter of a book that just gave me some clarity around how to fill this kind of 2-hour slot, and it worked out really nicely. And I completed that whole first training and thought, yeah, you can do this, and look at how you've grown, and look at how the people on this program have grown. And yeah, hold fast, stay the course. It works.
I love that story. So that's like, because it sort of reveals your own process as a teacher of teachers, which I think is important, because like you said, whenever we're leading things, we grow into it and beyond it, but it's such a growth process for the people leading the thing. And you trusting yourself is just going to model that for the teachers that you're training, right? And being open to what comes in terms of material.
Absolutely. You just got to show up and give of yourself. You've got a responsibility to your students, whatever you're teaching, a private, a group class, a retreat, which has a different feel from training. You've got a responsibility to your students. And you can't get in your own way by getting doubtful or uncertain or frightened. You just got to put yourself, there in the crucible. In fact, be the crucible and be stronger than the elements that, are being melted within the crucible. You just got to show up.
That's it, right? Showing up and trusting. Now, when you're showing up with your wife as well, Margot. She does all this stuff with you. What's that like, the two of you working together? And what does she bring to the party that maybe you don't, or that enhances what you do?
Well, it's fantastic working with Margot. When we first started Apollo Power Yoga, she was still involved with the legal profession. But she quickly, the decision to open our studio was a joint one, and we always intended working together in the studio. And so it wasn't long after we opened the studio that she resigned her partnership. And what she got when she was bought out of her partnership was what we used to get us through the first couple of years of running with tiny classes in a difficult environment, but with the outgoings of rent and power and things like that to me. So, we just drew on our own resources to hold ourselves together. And thank you, Margot, for having that to bring to the equation. But the more and more we work together, the more I'm convinced that we're a great complementary team. We're similar. We've both got a passion for this Baptiste style of practice, and we deliver the methodology in a really consistent way. But I've got a slightly different style from Margot, and people respond slightly differently to me to what they do to her. And so it's been really good to be able to be involved with Margot, not me shouldering all the responsibility of the teaching, but Margot and I sharing it. When we do 40 Days to Personal Revolution programs through our studio, we alternate, we take turns, who has which teaching responsibilities, and so we really share in that. We've shared recently in teaching a retreat up in Nelson, where we both contributed fully to the program. And on teacher training, we've divided up the work. And she contributes some really nice material and has some really good sections of the program that she delivers, and gets good feedback from the participants who enjoy her style, enjoy her demeanor, and enjoy her knowledge.
Any challenges that you guys have to navigate in terms of being together and running a studio together and running programs together?
It's interesting. Occasionally, we meet up at the end of the day, and there might be some business things to talk about. And right at the end of the day, if I've been teaching a number of classes, I might be a little bit tired. That's not a good time for a business meeting. So you've got to just be a little bit patient with one another, and actually book in a time when we can talk business. But actually, Margot's very patient with me and my foibles and my weaknesses. And I think we work really well together. She does more of the admin than me. I've got a slightly heavier teaching load than she does. But we both contribute in our own ways to making Apollo Power Yoga what it is. And we get on amicably, and we really enjoy the process of creating what we are as a team together.
I'm curious about, because you mentioned this to me, is that the philosophical underpinnings for your teachings, Yoga Sutras, which are often, of course, the philosophical underpinnings when teaching yoga, but you also use the 4 agreements, which I haven't heard many yoga teachers talk about as part of their underpinnings. Can you explain, like, why the 4 agreements, what drew you to those, and how does that inform your teaching?
We sponsor a young teacher in Africa through the Africa Yoga Program, which is an organization that Baptiste Power Yoga in the United States is involved with. And the general philosophy is that young teachers are trained through the Africa Yoga Project in Nairobi, and then they are sponsored by first world countries to go out, and while they undertake a 3-year program of growth and training through Africa Yoga Project, in that time, we sponsor them, and they go out into their community and teach classes on a complimentary basis to the people in their community. And what we do is we have monthly interviews with the person that we're sponsoring, our mentor, our mentee, and we have a program that Africa Yoga Project has set that we follow with them. And one of the exercises that we did a couple of years ago with our mentee referenced for this 4 agreements of Don Miguel Ruiz, and it piqued my interest, and I followed the thread. And the more I looked at what the 4 agreements were, the more I saw that they were highly compatible with other philosophical teachings that I had done through Baptiste Power Yoga, and they resonated with me. And just to simply summarize, if that's okay, Kara-Leah, the 4 agreements.
Yeah, do, please.
The 4 agreements are, first, be impeccable with your word, which is something that I haven't always been. Words have always come easily to me. They just flow off my tongue. And sometimes there's not enough of a filter between a notion coming to my head and the words coming out of my mouth. And so be impeccable with your word has reminded me just to slow down, be careful, and be conscious of the way the words are going to land with my receiving environment. Agreement number 2, that's a guard against someone who is not impeccable with their word. Agreement number 2 is don't take anything personally. Agreement number 3 is make no assumptions. Assumptions are the underpinning of racism and sexism. They're the underpinnings of judgmentalism towards disabled people and so on. And they're also the underpinnings of negative self-impression, just assuming that one's not good enough, or one's not right, or one's got the wrong colored hair, or one doesn't have the right income, or whatever. Those assumptions just undermine connection and vitality and emotional and spiritual well-being. So, make no assumptions. And agreement number 4 is always do your best. It's not a counsel of perfection. The agreements are hard to stick to 100% all of the time, but do your best. And so I've heard those 4 agreements, and they resonate with me because I just feel from my life that I've got an experience of both the value of complying with them and the downside of breaching them.
I'm familiar with them because I read the book a number of years ago, and I know, like, for example, like, make no assumptions. It's so hard to do that one. And in particular, I found that one was really useful for helping me to see into the unconscious, because those assumptions that are being made we're often unconscious of them. But if I'm aware of not making assumptions, I start to notice when I have, because of the impact. Does that make sense? Kind of like, it's only by noticing the impact. It's like, oh shit, I was unconsciously making an assumption there. So I can totally see how well that dovetails in with yoga in terms of starting to understand what patterns, what samskaras, etc., are running to undo those patterns.
Yeah, I like that.
Awesome. That's so cool. So do you teach them in your trainings, or are they just kind of underpinning how you operate with regards to the studio, or do you actually actively teach them to the people?
No, it's more an underpinning.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't specifically say you've got to read this book, but we do reference them, and they form a background to some of the framing of the questioning and the inquiry that we do in various of our sessions under the aegis of yoga philosophy, lifestyle, and ethics.
Awesome. Alrighty, so to wrap up, I'm really curious to know, what are you most excited about teaching in the studio, or in your training programs over the next 6 months or so? What's got you all fired up?
What's got me all fired up is the forthcoming training. We've already talked about how I feel that it is my greatest challenge, but also brings out the best in me. And I'm really looking forward to working with a good group of people in January in a nice location. It's just Wainui on the Banks Peninsula, about an hour's drive from Christchurch. It's a beautiful environment. It's rural, it's scenic. There's beautiful bush life and bird life right on Aperol Harbour. Very nice. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to an Italian yoga retreat that we're going to be participating in late June next year. We're going to be going to Tuscany and basing ourselves just outside of Florence at a place called Fiesole, and we'll be there for 8 days, and we'll have a lovely time under the Tuscan sun, practicing yoga and visiting the sites and participating in all that the cradle of the Renaissance has to offer.
So you'll get all filled up come June next year. It must be awesome to be going and doing something where you're fully receiving rather than leading or facilitating or holding the space,
Yeah, exactly. We'll work, we'll show up, we'll provide meditation and yoga and more vital yoga in the morning and more relaxing yoga in the evenings. So we'll be working there, but also we'll be able to go out and participate with people and just soaking up the ambiance of Tuscany.
So you are actually teaching the yoga and the meditation on that retreat?
Yeah.
Right. So you're not fully receiving. Awesome. And then one final question on your training that starts in January, is that residential?
Yes, it is. We do it in an intensive. It's 8 days. The price of the program, which is 2,500 New Zealand dollars, covers your accommodation and your meals during the course of the program and all your tuition. So if you can get yourself to Wainui on the Banks Peninsula, then $2,500 covers everything else, and we'll have a great time. We're based at the YMCA camp there, but they've got some nice buildings with simple but comfortable accommodation, and we provide our own chef. There's this guy called Samson Samakaru, who calls himself the Rolling Gnome, and he's an amazing chef. At one time, he was a chef at one of the most prominent wineries in the Canterbury region. He's really well qualified, and he did a beautiful job of catering for all our dietary requirements and needs during our last training. He really added value, and we've got him coming back this time as well.
Awesome. Because I know when I go do trainings or that kind of thing, for me, like staying on site and being fed, it just means I can fully relax and soak up the offering of the training rather than having to go to my accommodation and think about what to organize for food. Like, it makes such a difference in terms of being able to absorb the material and the experience and to integrate it and process it as well.
Yeah, I like the idea, and we've done this with all our trainings, of taking people away from the city. making it far enough away that they can't, flip backwards and forwards, that they have to put their life behind them and really commit and devote their time on the training to the training, do the training, and so that you can really reap all the rewards. And the immersive quality of it, the condensed nature of it, is really powerful.
Awesome. Hamish, thank you so much for talking to us again. It's really nice. Like, I just have a sense, like, I can't quite remember the last interview we did, but I can just feel the difference in your presence. Like, there's a real ease and a depth and a joy there. It's like you're doing the thing, and it's so beautiful to witness and to see. So thank you for all that you're doing for people in Christchurch with the yoga studio that you and Margot are running, Apollo Power Yoga, and for the way that you're training teachers to become awesome.
Thank you so much, Kara-Leah. It's been lovely talking to you again.